Good evening. Welcome to Earth to the Other Side. My name's John Glasspool, and I have the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Gary Goss this evening, who had an NDE back in, I'm not sure, but he was 19 years old, and we'll leave it at that. He had a motorcycle accident. Gary, welcome to the show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Pleased to meet you. Yes, I was 19. I was I suffered a lot of headaches during my teens, up to my late teens. But this particular morning, I had got on my motorbike and went to go to work. When we had at the other end of our little village town, we had a real double S bends, which was like 2-3 accidents there a week because people just misjudged it. And I actually took the wrong lane. I got trapped against the curb. When I can't say for how many seconds it went black, and I was just literally felt like I was whisked straight out of my body. I was whisked into, all I can describe it, it was blackness, and there was millions of sparkly lights. Then I appeared onto a higher round, what I call it, and there was a white bridge in front of me with a magnificent being on the other side. And above in the, I think it might have been the sky, was a beautiful sun-like object which didn't hurt when you looked into it, but that was shining down over his left shoulder. I looked to my right, to my left, sorry, and there was hundreds of people in this field, hundreds of them. And two I immediately recognised was my gran, who died approximately a year before, and her sister, who died approximately 5-6 months before this accident. They looked so healthy, just so fit, so much younger than when they died. And they was like swirling about this field like they was chasing this blue ball. Now, I have no idea. But when I looked to my right, I perfectly saw this side. So I saw my body all crumpled up. I saw a guy in a old Morris Marina. He stopped. He came running over. He cradled my head. And he was saying, wake up, wake up. And I was like, all I could describe it, I was actually sort of like standing by the side of him. And I could just like physically reach out and just touch him. And he just kept saying, wake up, just rocking me. And meanwhile, I had these words come into my head. Gary, would you like to stay for eternal peace and happiness? Or would you like to go back? And I was 19, and I thought, oh my God, this will kill my mother if I died. And I'm like, and I just thought, I would like to go back, please. And I just upended, and I just floated back into my body. And then I started to come round. I have no idea who called the ambulance. And I was like so out of it. They took me up to the hospital, and I wasn't really like conscious. I don't remember going into the theatre or anything. It was only sort of like several hours later when I appeared on the ward and started to come round, when I started to try and make sense of it all, because it was like, what on earth happened? What? How can you explain that to someone? What you saw, what, and everything like that, and then the realization that this person I saw the other side of this white bridge across this stream, it was Jesus, and then it all went off from there. Really, the consultant come and introduced himself, who patched me all up. And then that was 11 days of hospital, because I had a punctured lung and 3 broken ribs. And every day I was being taken down to the x-rays to get it all x-rayed, all my ribs and everything. And by the 10th, 11th day, They said to me the night before, Gary, this was the SHO, the consultant's SHO. He said, tomorrow, what we'll do, we will have to be putting a big slit down your rib cage, and we have to insert tubes into your lungs to get rid of all the dangerous poison gases, because it was building up every day. And they're like, it's quite critical. So I prayed that night, which I'd never done in my life, and went down the next day. Quite a few hours later, the SHO came back up and said, look, with a look on his face, and he said, oh, we won't have to slice you open and put a tube in. He said, the gases have disappeared and they're not there. They've gone. I'm like, oh, thank God for that. And basically, that was my experience.
Well, thank you for sharing it, and it's quite extraordinary. You said that you saw Jesus in your experience. You don't really have, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you don't come from a very religious background.
No, but non-religious family. This person, he had this white robe on, his long golden hair. He was humble. He appeared humble, but magnificent. I can't explain it. It was just like unbelievable, but it was just like realization. It was like this deep knowing. That's all I can put it down to. It's this deep knowing, but it was Jesus.
A lot of NDEers who talk about having seen Jesus, or they usually have their own perception. They report back how Jesus looked to them, and it's often different. Not to say that they didn't see who they thought they saw, but I think everybody just sort of perceives him in a way that makes sense to them.
Yeah.
So I was just curious, as to how you perceived him, how you saw him.
No, it was just like this really, really strong knowing when I was trying to, from the start to where I ended up, and I'm like, I know I was groggy sort of thing, but it was like I was trying to put it in through my mind sort of thing, and it was just this like really strong knowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so when you started coming to in the hospital, do you recall who the first people or person you saw, like whether it was a nurse, family member, doctor?
The first person I seem to remember was it must have been the consultant who'd come up and introduced himself, that he had operated on me. And
at that point, did you already recall your experience? Had you thought about it at all?
Oh yeah. I was going through it, because not being religious and never heard of an NDE or anything, I hadn't seen my first spirits since till 2-3 years later. So I wasn't into any of that sort of stuff. So it was. I was just trying to go through my brain. What on earth is that all about? It's just like it's something you can't talk to people, especially in my like ring of friends or anything like that, or my family. They'd put me away in Broadmoor, thinking I was nutcase.
Do you remember who you spoke to first? The first time you spoke about the experience with somebody?
No, I was very careful because of what do you call it? My whole of my friends, my family. I never spoke. It was only after I read this book quite a while afterwards, Elizabeth Taylor's, and then there was 1 or 2 people I met who was like into spirits and mediums and stuff like that. But I was very sort of like cautious. And then I got sort of like further on, and I did start opening up to people who understood and sort of like didn't think I was, laugh at me and things like that. Didn't think I was an idiot.
And did you think that, acquaintances or friends or family of yours who were religious or not even like very religious, but maybe, went to church once in a while or were from a Christian background, did you think that you could speak with these type of people about this?
No, no. It took me a long, long, long time until I started to get to one of the because it was just not something a subject you approached.
Hmm.
Not in
Yeah.
my circle. Not in my circle.
So this might even have been, well, I'm trying to think, when did Raymond Moody's book come out? That was in the 70s, like 74, 75 or
Raymond
something.
Moody. I
Did
don't
you,
think I've
did
read
you,
that one.
oh, you haven't read that?
No.
Okay. He's the individual who we believe coined the phrase near death experience.
Oh,
And
right.
he had written about several, because he had been interviewing several near death experiencers, and did all kinds of research and put this book together called, I think, Life After Life. And it
Oh,
was a real
yes.
breakthrough. Mm.
I, I think I came across that in a charity shop. Oh, about 30, 30, 40 years ago. Not long after this experience, but I don't remember anything about it whatsoever.
I'm sure that would have had a huge effect on your life had you discovered that book, after your experience. That's interesting. But a lot of people hadn't. I mean, back then we didn't have YouTube and or no, we didn't have the internet. So if you wanted to get some information, your only recourse was the
Books.
library.
Yeah,
Hmm.
books.
And I mean, who knows how much you would find in the library on this, other than the obvious books. Are you aware of any abilities that you might have that you can attribute to your near-death experience, such as like anything psychic related,
Uh,
heightened intuition?
um, Before my accident, I did have a very terrifying experience at the age of 10, which frightened the life out of me. But the universe obviously thought I was ready to view it. But since the accident, like I said, I had my first experience of seeing a spirit three 3-ish years after this. One late night, and I saw a lady in a white dress floating above the railway tracks, all in white. And the thing was, when I went over the railway crossing, my car was really hot. I went over the railway tracks, and it was like an ice box. It was freezing, and I get when there's spirits. When I have seen spirits, I get this feeling that I have to look, but it's like I have to. I get this thing in my head, but I have to look. And there's a spirit, and I looked in the mirror, and there was this. As I say, there was this woman in an old-fashioned dress floating above the tracks. But since then, I've had numerous encounters. Um, not hundreds or 50 or 60, but I have seen a fair few spirits in my time. I lived in my first house after I split up. I had a poltergeist, which nearly tried to take my mum's head off with the largest book on my bookcase. I had a small man from the 12th century. I'm sure he was trying to protect me from it because it never attacked me. But I had a spirit cat and a shadow being who was kept himself to himself. But
Was this all
uh,
around the same time?
no. This was like mid 2000s after I split from my wife.
When
But
did the
yeah,
poltergeist incident happen?
but when I moved into my first house, luckily I'd been given the keys the night before the moving day to move stuff in, and my mother was in the lounge, and I'd already had the bookcase in, and I heard this almighty scream of God in there, and she said that book's just been thrown at my head, and it was like a really thick book, and she said it's just missed my head, and I'm like, oh my God, I've got a flaming poltergeist. So but luckily working in Broadmoor, the works vicar was also the county's exorcist. So he came round on the following, this was on the Tuesday, the following Monday he came round because of his work schedule, and he came and cleansed my house and got rid of it for me, which was good. Because I couldn't put up with the smells. They was absolutely gross, disgusting.
Was it like a sulfur smell?
It was, all I can say, in our small town, we had a sewerage works and a mushroom farm. Now, on a hot day, when that kicked up, but you can imagine it was, but the smells this poltergeist was leaving all around my house was like twice as worse as that. It
So
was
no idea where this or how this poltergeist came about,
no idea, no idea.
and
No,
nothing since. Nothing since then.
no, no,
Yeah.
no, no, not really. I don't know whether I attracted them, because I was working in Broadmoor and we've been through some really, really bad stuff. So, and you get very negative. So I don't know whether I actually drew it to me.
What was your outlook on the afterlife? Prior to your experience, is it something you ever really thought about? Because I know you were quite young.
Never, never, never thought about it. I never thought about it really, because it never even entered the sort of like spectrum. We was like into motocross and just playing around and messing around and doing normal teenage boy stuff really. But ghosts and stuff like that never even entered our thoughts.
But had you ever thought, oh, okay, well, I guess after this it's lights out, or
Oh,
maybe there's something
yeah,
else?
yeah, no, I did, yeah, yeah. To be honest, yeah, at that age, when you die, my thought was that's it, just go into the ground and that's it. But obviously now I know the spirit moves on, and you go to a higher realm, higher place.
Are you into meditation or anything? Have you done anything like that since you're?
I've tried over and over to do meditation, but yeah, I found it quite impossible really, due to the nature of my work dealing with mental patients, and the incidents you have. It's like really, really hard to get down to that level to like relax your mind.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I find it quite fascinating, because you read other people's and they're different. They're along the same lines. They've been given information. Some have been to the Akashic records, and it's like, wow. Some have been told, come back not to say anything about this, and like it's just mind blowing.
Definitely. So do you have any I don't know, a last message that you want to convey to our listeners, our viewers out there, about your experience, what your experience taught you? Anything you want to give them?
I encourage people, if they have had an NDE, I open up and tell someone appropriate, and talk to people. Don't be embarrassed, because it's a real experience and it's real for you. And whatever your experience was, it was meant for you and no one else. I hope that makes sense.
It does, and that's no, that's good advice. Cool, man. Well, I've really enjoyed talking with you, Gary. Thank you so much for
And you,
sharing your
John.
experience.
Pleased to meet you, mate. Pleased to meet
Pleased
you.
to meet you.
I would like to tell you about the experience.
Hmm.
not anything to do with the NDE. When I moved into my flat 3 months after my father passed, for about 2 years I was getting knocks, cracks, bangs, and I'm like, it wasn't malicious or anything like that. So after the COVID restrictions over in the UK, I managed to find a good media. Said, look, can you come and investigate something? Um, just just to tell me who it is. And I've opened the door to him, and he said, "Oh, your dad's been trying to get your attention because he wants forgiveness." I'm like, "No, that's not my old man. Not with me, anyway." He said, "No." He said, "No, seriously." He said, Your father's been wants forgiveness for the way he's treated you from his brothers." I'm like, "Right, okay, I accept that. I forgive him." No, this was like 21 Christmas, November, Christmas 21. November last year, I had gone up the pub. I was watching the TV. I've only got a small entrance hall, and I've looked to my left and there's a pair of white trousers and a pair of legs in the white, very, very white trousers. So he's presented himself in these white trousers instead of a full sort of like apparition, which I found quite funny, really. And it just disappeared into the wall. And I'm like, oh my God.
So it was
What?
just the trousers
Yeah,
themselves that you
yeah,
saw?
just a pair of legs and just a pair of legs and these really, really bright white trousers. I'm like, oh, Dad,
I love
please.
it.
I'm not going to be scared if you appear. Yeah, I thought that was quite cracking one. That was. At least he
Yeah.
tried, or he
Hey,
didn't want to. Or
he came through. That's the main thing, right?
yeah, yeah. It's odd.
That's
It was
awesome.
odd.